To put it in a nutshell, right? So first there was criollo, domesticated by the Olmecs, the Mayans, it's thousands of years old.
They wanted criollo, which is the white-seeded varietal, mainly because it didn't have the pigment which is associated with astringencies and bitterness.
And bitterness, right? But the other thing that, people talk about, this legendary criollo, is very little in commercial cultivation. It was never bred for chocolate bars, right? I mean, chocolate bars only became an actual thing, a solid bar in like the 1800s, yeah, right? So it's interesting, it was domesticated for a beverage, right? And what happened is several hundred years ago in Trinidad, at that point in time, 1800s, people only cultivated criollo. There was no other, there was wild cacao in the forests, but nobody cultivated that, right? And what happened was this mysterious event called the blast. Nobody knows whether this is like a hurricane or whether this was a disease, wiped out a lot of these criollo trees in Trinidad, right? And so what they did was they went to the mainland, South America.
What century are we talking about?
It's like 1800s. They went to the mainland and they brought back some wild type cacao that we would now refer to as amelonado, right? And what they did was they planted that in the holes where criollo trees had died, or cut some of them down. But in the end, it was still a mix, right? It was amelonado heavy. What happened is over hundreds of years, these trees randomly cross-pollinated and produced, you call like a hybrid progeny, right? And people realized, oh wow, like these trees have some of the characteristics of the criollo that we really like and are used to, but they have the vigor and the strength. And it's interesting, was this is a phenomenon really well known in plant breeding, known as F1 hybridization. It's
the first.
Yeah, first filial generation, right? So when you take two separate genetically rather inbred lines, which the amelonado was as well. It's another story as to why some wild cacao was inbred, but basically the Amazon goes from, the lower reaches of the Andes all the way through gradually and discharges in the Atlantic. I mean, and at the very bottom where the, Amazon discharges, that's kind of the end of the line. So the center of diversity is up high, right? So amelonado stuff, it's growing wild down in the state of like Pará and Brazil, was actually very genetically uniform. Incidentally.
Because that's further down.
Yeah, right. It's far away from the center of diversity, which is in the what they call the upper Amazon. So what happened is, people said, hey, these hybrid trees, are pretty nice, but a couple hundred years went by. And then finally, around the turn of the 20th century, researchers down there said, let's do, what you call like farmer-assisted selection. So basically, they went around to farmers all over the island of Trinidad who have now had many generations of these randomly admixed Trinitario.
And this is why when you say it's more of a population.
It is population, yeah, but we're getting to how now you get varietal with Trinitario, right? So what happened was they, and this is kind of becoming popularized again now, is this, farmers that spend every day in the field, they're the ones that see, these trees every day, harvest them. They have a feel that you wouldn't as a researcher coming in at one snapshot moment in time, right? Yeah, so what you do is you go and you interview these farmers and you say, hey, which of these trees are the best, and like I did some of this in Belize, and the question I would phrase it was, if you could have, 1,000, your entire farm of just the best tree, the best 5 trees, which ones? Mm-hmm. And without fail, these farmers can take you. You go walk in for 5 minutes through and they're like, this one right here.
Yeah, this one produces 135 pods every year. And
right. So what the researchers in Trinidad decided to do was, well, let's cast a wide net. We'll kind of thin it down. And they did 100 clones, right? And so these were known as the ICS series, Imperial College Selection. You'll still see ICS. I mean,
if you originated out of Trinidad.
In Trinidad, right. Okay. And what they were is just amelonado and criollo. There was no other genetic contributor to that original population, right? And it was, now look, when you criollo and amelonado, and whether one is a pollen donor and the other, male and female, it's a 50-50 cross, that F1, right? After that, they just keep randomly recombining. So you have a 50-50 criollo amelonado that might get back crossed to either criollo or amelonado.
Become more dominant in one of them.
And nobody's controlling us. They're not hand pollinating. So hundreds of years go by and you end up with this just shuffling the deck over and over and over again. So nothing's 50-50 anymore, right? So you have all kinds of shapes and sizes and colors. You had some with very high percentage of white seeds. You had others of deep purple seeds.
And so on our farm, you've recreated this for the first time since 18 something?
Yeah, but it's deliberate.